Okay, welcome back, everybody. So today we start Levinas. So of course we'll begin with your impressions and your experience with Levinas. So let's start our poll. Any tens for Levinas? 9, 8, 7. Okay, 1, 7, 6. All right, 5, 4, 3. Trujillo. Wow, all the threes. 2. Uh-oh, Cancino. 1. Jolevas. Okay, let's start with the haters. Cancino, Jolevas. Would you like to?
So it's hard to read his text. And then also, I was just wondering if he's trying to teach people about God, and it's post-Holocaust. Why does he make it so complicated? That's what I was.
That's a good question. Okay, let me try and respond, and then we'll listen to Cancino, right? So remember what I told you, right? Levinas is, his writing is traumatized, right? Not just him. So the fragmented character of his writing, the fact that nothing ends, nothing begins, everything is fragmented, everything is like shattered, right? When you read Levinas, you have the impression of gathering little shattered shards, lying around and trying to put them together. So so first of all, right, the difficulty of reading has to do with his personality, which has shattered, right? But the other reason, of course, has to do with the fact that I believe he is himself struggling, right, to make sense. So you are invited, kind of like with Marcel, right, on his journey of trying to find meaning out of something which has no meaning, which is the suffering of the death of so many people, right? So that he's, in a way, as we struggle to read him, we are entering his own wrestling with meaning, his own journey to the, I don't know if you're familiar with the Catholic notion of Via Dolorosa, which is the path of the cross, right? Where Jesus is walking with a cross and it's laborious and he's sweating blood. This is Levinas. Right, and we are reading the trail of blood that he is leaving behind. So he himself is perspiring blood as he's writing this. So of course it's difficult to understand because he himself is struggling to make sense of it. Does that make sense, Jolevas?
Yeah, it does. It's just, I don't know. The writing is very. Yeah, it's one of those complicated situations. I don't get how you can be so complicated and have people try to interpret it, and then they had such a rough time.
Yeah, so if you know more of the history of philosophy, it becomes like an enigma. It becomes, in a way, like a mystery that you can solve if you know enough, right? So Levinas is decipherable, let's put it this way, right? But you need to know, like, his thought, he's just drawing on, it's all pouring out, right? Remember, he had a training in philosophy before going into the war. So everything is kind of like, has been simmering, right, as he was in the labor camp, and it's all now exploding out. So he is decipherable, but you're right, it's not easy, it's not easily accessible, and he needs interpreters, definitely. I agree with you. Cancino, did you want to add to the despair of your companion?
Yeah, him and I kind of like agreed on a lot when him and I were like speaking, because it's like he has that background, but for those who also experienced the Holocaust didn't have that background. So it's like, why make it so difficult when everyone kind of wants to like not understand, but everyone's kind of feeling the same like anger and hatred. And it's just like you create this book that nobody can really read, you know. And then there was something that I had questioned about him. He talked about like the subjectivity of being, you know what I'm saying? And I was just like, well, I don't see that as a problem. I was like, because I was thinking of Marcel and the idea of mystery. And it's like, if we all have the same idea of being, what's the point of being and living? You know what I'm saying? So we kind of have to have that subjectivity. I don't feel like it should be questioned. because again, like I said, that opens up for mystery and that allows us to kind of explore a little more. And if we all have our own interpretation of being, we all live our own lives, and if anything, it's more beneficial to the world and ourselves as well.
Okay, great observations. Let me respond to both of your points. So first of all, we don't understand Levinas too much in our context in the United States, but the public of Europe, right, is actually well versed with those philosophers, right? Remember, don't forget that in Europe, we have philosophy in high school, unlike here in this barbaric and uncivilized country, right? So we have philosophy in high school. Most people know Plato, Aristotle, Heidegger, right? So the people who were reading Levinas were able to access a lot of what he was saying because the background, they were educated in that context, unlike us who have a different context, right? So he was, and also, right, he lectured, so he clarified, but he was mostly the average, right, person who had gone to college, right, could understand Levinas at the time, for sure, right? Now, going back to your notion of subjectivity of being, I don't know exactly the text you're talking about, but what Levinas is trying to say is that we need to move beyond being. So he's kind of, he's like Marcel, but he uses a different concept. So he's kind of like Marcel saying we need to move beyond what we see, except that for him, the beyond is not going to be this kind of gentle presence, right, that Marcel is talking about. It's going to be the other person, right? So for Levinas, the only possible transcendence, there's no mystery, right? There's nothing that's on our side, right? Unlike Marcel, Levinas doesn't believe in a force that works on our behalf because that force was in existence when he needed it, right? So he doesn't believe in a force like that. He believes the only possible way to move beyond ourselves is through contact with the human others. So he kind of like puts water on the fire of Marcel's philosophy, right? A little bit. Cancino, does that answer a little bit your questions?
Yeah, I think just like reading the different texts and it's just like learning about like these different philosophers, you're kind of like, but that's not what this guy said, you know what I'm saying? Like, God doesn't have to be there for everyone's sufferings, you know, and it's just like, you know, but then again, it was like 6 million people that went through like this terrible thing. So like you do see both sides, but then like learning both, like from learning all of this stuff, every time I read something, I think of everyone else that we've read, and I'm like, but this person wouldn't agree with this. So I'm sometimes a little conflicted because I'm just like, I really like what this person said, but I'm like, I do understand what he's saying. So it's just like a huge just thing of thoughts in my head, really.
Good. That's what I want. I want you guys to have this kind of like audience in your head. Talking back and forth. Excellent. Okay, let's try some of the lovers. Who were you? Who would like to manifest? A couple of you, like who are 7 or 6. Would you like to say a few words of encouragement?
Yeah, it's Rodriguez. I was gonna say, so I didn't understand much of what he was saying, and what my group and I were talking about. I was like, I felt like he needed to have read many of these philosophical writings. He's referring to so much other philosophy that I've not myself read, but I'm going to compare this. I don't know if anybody else in this, I'm sure the professor has, but if you ever read Proust, Remembrance of All Things Past, you can read 150 pages and get like one moment of satisfaction.
Yes.
That's precisely what I felt reading this.
Yes.
I mean, it's a tiny glimpse, and then it fades away when you continue reading. So that was my experience with the text.
Yes, Levinas is a tease. He's teasing us philosophically. And we're left, like Marcel, right? We're left frustrated because we need to continue the work, right? That's the idea often with those philosophers. Okay, anything else before I get into that text, before we get into
I want to say something.
Yes, go ahead, Trujillo.
Okay, I did find some relation with this lecture with Stuart Hall.
With what?
Stuart Hall.
Oh, I don't know this person. Tell us some more.
Who?
I don't know, Stuart.
Stuart Hall, he is a philosopher from Jamaica.
Okay.
He grew up in England. And he talks about the West and the rest, and also signifier and signified. And I saw so much information in the lecture with those things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you read any other 20th century author, right, you're gonna have, they're all talking in the same, right, the same language. Very good. Good observation. Excellent. All right, let's get into the text. Here's the outline for today. Number one, the problem of the hidden God. And number two, ethics as a mode of approach to God. So these are the first hour, we'll do the problem of the hidden God. Second hour, we'll do ethics. So let me reiterate a little bit, again, what Levinas is doing, right? Remember, Levinas is addressing an audience who has just come out of the Holocaust, right? This is an audience which the concept of God has been shattered. Remember that, make sure you write that down, right? The traditional notions of God as all loving, all powerful, all knowing is gone, right? Because if he was all knowing, he could have warned us, right? If he was all powerful, he could have intervened. If he was all loving, he wouldn't have allowed this, right? So this traditional concept of God as this kind of, powerful being who's in control doesn't fit with the picture of reality, right? So people are coming out and they're asking two questions. Make sure you write this down. Number one, where was God? Where was this all-knowing, omnipotent, all-loving God? And number two, if he was around, who is he? Right? Who is this God? We don't recognize what happened. We don't recognize his features based on our prior knowledge, based on our concept, right? So in many ways, it's not so much God that dies during the Holocaust, but the concept of God, right? Because what Levinas is going to do, he's going to have to reshape the concept, right? He's going to have to give us a new concept of God if we can put the two together. Right now, we can't put the two together. You can't have the Holocaust and an all-powerful God next to it. Doesn't work, right? So if we're going to find our way back to God, we have to reformulate for ourselves, who is this God, if there is a God, right? Okay, so this is the task of Levinas, right? How do we find our way back through the rubble, through the chaos, to some kind of spiritual connection, right, with God, without betraying the victims, right, without falling back on what Nietzsche calls the comfortable, right, the religion of the bourgeoisie, right? Let me write this big word down. Right, the bourgeoisie is the kind of people who is the privilege. Bourgeoisie is the equivalent today of white privilege. So it's a comfortable God who helps you, helps you get ahead. Everything opens up, right? Right. So Levinas is saying, right, how do we get, right? Clearly, we are not dealing with such a God, right? This God is finished. We have to move away from this religion of comfortableness that Nietzsche hated. So you see, by the way, notice how Levinas is also responding to Nietzsche, right? He's also got Nietzsche in mind. Nietzsche's accusation of religion as being just comfort, a crutch, right? Levinas is going to say, well, this is anyways, doesn't work anymore. This religion has been shattered. We need to move towards something else. So Levinas, in a way, is following in Nietzsche's footsteps. He's agreeing that this type of faith in a God who comforts us, who helps us, who does everything for us, not only is not true, but it's there. We can't have that anymore. It's an insult to the victims to fall back on such a God. Okay, so make sure you write this down. This is important, right? The connection between Levinas and Nietzsche, right? Like Nietzsche, let me say it again, right? Levinas wants to discard this idea of a God who is there to comfort us, to help us, but he doesn't want to discard it for the same reason as Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche wants to discard it because for him it's a lie, right? It's a delusion. Levinas wants to discard it because for him it's an insult to the ones who died in the Holocaust. I cannot, as a survivor, fall back into a comfortable religion knowing that all of my family has been genocided without God moving a finger, right? I can't do it. That's how Levinas is feeling, right? So you can see how he's really on the same wavelength as Nietzsche, but of course he's going to try to maneuver out of the godlessness. He's going to try and find his way back, but in a way which Nietzsche might actually respect, right? We're going to see, right? Whether whether Nietzsche would be happy with Levinas's approach, right? Okay. So he begins a text, very complicated text, one of the most difficult ones, I agree. I'm on page 66, so you can go there. He begins by talking, right, about this God that we cannot figure out, right? He's talking about really the shattering of the concept of God. After the Holocaust, we cannot be sure anymore whether God exists, who he is, right? So he talks about this, and he's going to move towards a description of God as an enigma, and we're going to see what that entails, right? So let's begin together. Page 66, as rational speech, who is there? Wave at me if you're there. Okay. All right. As rational speech, philosophy is taken to move from evidence to evidence, directed to what is seen, to what shows itself, thus directed to the present. Okay, so here he's talking about the Western mindset. And the Western mindset always wants to understand, right? Reason always wants to grasp, to understand. And so he's saying that this is, we like, right? Western thought always wants evidence, clarity, what is seen, what shows itself. It wants to understand, right? And what Levinas is going to say is that there are some things that reason cannot understand. And in this way, he's very close to many of the people we study. Rumi, Marcel, both say that, right? You cannot approach God with your head, right? But Levinas is going to stay. He's very, very close to Maimonides, right? Levinas, remember, same tradition as Maimonides. So he's not going to say, oh, we need to open the heart. No. He's going to say the mind can still apprehend, but differently, right? So some of you who are rationalists would probably appreciate Levinas, right? He's much less mystical than Marcel and Rumi, right? So he says this, go to the third paragraph, and yet human thought. Who is there? Wait, let me. Okay. And yet human thought. So notice, he's still on the level of the philosophical approach to God. Human thought, right, has known concepts, or has, as though mad, operated with notions in which the distinction between presence and absence was not clear cut, right? So let me stop on that a little bit. So he's saying, philosophical thought, Western thought, actually, yes, it wants to understand, it wants to clarify, but it is aware that there are some elements, there are some dimensions that we cannot understand. And it is aware intellectually, right? So he quotes several of these, right? The Platonic dimension of the one, the good. In essence, what he's saying is that even philosophy has stumbled upon a dimension that it cannot understand. So even philosophy has awakened, right? Even Western thought, even our reason has awakened at times to concepts or dimensions that, oh, it can't reach, it can't go further, it cannot cross the threshold in order to understand, right? And he's saying God is one of those notions, right? When it comes to God, we try to understand, but we just hit against the wall. And here he brings very interesting concept, very interesting dance between presence and absence. So let me explain. In other words, what he's saying is that God manifests himself to the mind, to the human being, as both present and absent. You can see that Levinas enjoys, one of you in your paper wrote that Levinas enjoyed putting contradictions together. He does. You're right. Good intuition. So, all right. So let me ask you, what does it mean that God is both present and absent? Can anyone tell me what this strange description means?
I think he makes a comment here on the last page, on the last part of the page 76. He says something that transcend and not transcend.
Yes, same idea.
So he's related to that. It means he manifests, but maybe not in the way that they expect.
Okay, yes, I like what you said. So he manifests, right? God does appear, but not in the way that we expect. And so we often miss him. And so it becomes an absence. I like that. I haven't thought of it like that, but I think all of you can write this. This is a good interpretation, right? That God appears, but because it doesn't appear in the way we expect, we miss. We don't see, right? That's a very nice way to put it. Thank you, Trujillo. That's very informative. There's another way to see this, that God is both present and absent. Who can give me an alternative?
I'd say presence and absence is like I guess presence would be understood as his presence as a concept in the minds of many people, whereas absence is the tangibleness, that the physical presence of God is not there. But his presence as a concept in the world is,
Okay, I like
there.
that too. You guys are great. You guys are coming up with amazing interpretations. Let's write this one down too. Right? This idea that he's present in our mind. We have a concept, we have an intuition of God, but when we look around, there's nothing. It doesn't appear. By the way, Descartes, for once, this is one moment that Levinas likes Descartes. Let me write his name down. Had similar vision. Let me just open a parenthesis for Descartes, right? Descartes said that we have been given the idea of infinity. And so he ponders, how is it that we know infinity? When we look around the world, nothing is infinite. Where did we get this concept, right? And so then he goes on to say that, well, it was placed within us by God, right? It's one of the traces of God. God left his imprint. He left his, identification, right? Or barcode on our minds, right? So in a way, the fact that we are aware of the infinite is one of the proofs that the infinite might exist, because we wouldn't know about it if it hadn't been imprinted on us, right? So that's what, and Levinas goes along that line. He appreciates Descartes on that level, right? Even though for everything else he destroys it. So yes, very good, Blades. Anybody else want to try it? Presence and absence. What does it mean?
Sorry, there was, just to like bring up another point, I think it's on page like 7, no wait. There's on page 70, he talks about like, if someone knocks but then no one's there, is it still there? And that's kind of like the idea of God, you know what I'm saying? Like, just because like we know he's there, but we can't physically see him, you know, because it's like the idea of like God is all encompassing and stuff like that. Like we know that, but again, like I said, there is no way that we can actually physically grasp or see him. It's just like the idea of two realms, you know what I'm saying? Like the realm of reality and then the realm of like God, and like, you know what I'm saying?
Very good. Yes. We'll come back actually to that particular passage. But this idea, he knocks and we open, he's not there. So very good. Bernard is adding that he's always within us, yet we may not be able to speak or interact, right? So yes, in a way he's within us, but we can't be sure. What Levinas is saying here, I'm going to add to everything else you've said, it all works, is that God appears, but we can't be sure if it really was God. Okay, let me give you an example, right? So there are many times, right, that God appears to us, but he appears to us in a way that we can't be sure that it's him, right? For example, right, you walking around, you need a park, you're right, driving around, you need a parking, you know, the classic parking space prayer. You pray for a parking space, parking opens up immediately, miraculously, and now you're like, part of you wants to believe that God opened up the parking space and therefore God exists. And part of you is like, oh, come on, stop it, right? Stop thinking like such stupid thoughts, right? So, and this is just a trivial example, but there are many moments in our lives where we sense that God could have been present. We have felt him or we have witnessed him. And on the other hand, we can't be sure that it wasn't just a coincidence. This is what Levinas is talking about. Okay, so let me say it again, right? God manifests himself in the world according to Levinas, but he does so in a way that we can't be sure, right? In other words, we feel a presence sometimes, we sense his intervention in our lives, but and it seems like he has done something and appeared, or we have felt him within us or around us. But at the same time, how can we be sure? How can it not be maybe a delusion, or we convinced ourselves, or maybe chance, right? So, and Levinas is saying, with such a God, it is impossible not to doubt deep down that perhaps there is no God, right? Because he appears, but at the same time, he withdraws, right? We're going to talk about why in a second, right? But for now, you can all, I think, connect to this reality that he appears, but at the same time withdraws. Kestenbaum, yes, would you like to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is essentially what you were saying, but I remember once being told that like the famous joke is a guy's looking for a parking spot in the mall and he says, God, if you give me a spot, I promise like I'll do anything you ask. I'll become devoted to you. And then as he's saying all this, he sees a spot and he says, oh God, never mind. Like a guy just pulled out. So I think that connects to the idea of like God being present, but also absent, as in the sense that it's entirely dependent on the worshiper. It's kind of like an atheist can choose to believe in God or not, but if God is real, then it's kind of irrelevant whether the atheist believes or not, because it doesn't change whether God is objective. Or I guess a better example is I can deny gravity, but whether I choose or what level I choose to believe in gravity doesn't negate the fact that if I drop a pencil, it'll fall to the ground. So too in our relationship to God, he's always present, but his absence is not because he's absent, but it's because we're absent.
Excellent. We're going to come back to this idea of the why we are important in terms of the existence of God, why the existence of God in a way depends on us. We're going to talk about that. So thanks for bringing that up, right? So in essence, if you want to summarize everything we've said, you can write that inevitably, when it comes to God, we can never be sure. That's basically what he's saying, right? When it comes to God, to the existence of God or who God is, we can never be sure. There's always going to be an element of doubt, right? Now, Levinas is going to move further because remember, he's talking to a bunch of people who are doubting, right? And he's going to say, actually, that doubt is the royal road to God. In other words, if you don't doubt, you're missing who God is, right? If you're certain, right? Doubt, remember, is in between certainty, right? Belief and atheism, right? Doubt is not sure. Doubt is the agnostic, right? And Levinas is saying God reveals himself to the agnostic, not to the believer, not to the atheist. In other words, doubt is the only way today to authentically connect to God. Why? Because if you're sure who God is, are you really in touch with God? If you know who God is, you understand everything, you know exactly what he wants. Are you still connecting to God at that moment? What do you think?
I don't think so, because I know we talked about the idea of like idolatry and stuff like that, and it's us kind of just like manifesting like this idea. And it's like if we think we know everything, you know, like it proves that we actually know nothing, you know, because you can't really sit here, like again, like just going back to what we've spoken about, we don't have the mental capacity to actually understand God. So if anything, we're really limiting him, and we're not understanding anything.
Very good, right? Remember, Levinas, behind Levinas is Maimonides, right? So Levinas is saying the person who thinks they know God, they know an idol, they know a construct of their own mind. And so Levinas is saying nobody can know, right? Now the other person, the atheist who thinks they know there is no God, is the same, right? They have also reduced God to their own concept, right? This is also the issue with atheism. They have chosen there is no God. They have made up the reality. Again, like the believer is the same thing. So that's why for Levinas, the doubter or the agnostic, right? Remember, the agnostic doesn't know. The atheist knows, the believer knows. Both of them know. And that for Levinas is dangerous, right? When it comes to God. The one who doesn't know, Socrates, right? The one who's not sure, the agnostic, that person is closer to God than either of these guys, right? And so it's interesting because Levinas is still giving us an intellectual path to God, right? Like Maimonides, he's not shifting to the heart, right? Saying, no, intellectually, we can connect through doubt. As long as you continuously question yourself, question your conceptions, question your representations, question everything you've learned, you are on the way. You are on the way to spiritual growth. As soon as you clamp down into, I know that he exists, that he doesn't, it's over, right? You're into a kind of idolatrous relationship, right? Everybody understands this first point, why doubt is the only road to God for Levinas? Put your hand up if you're following what I'm saying. Okay. All right, good. All right, so now the question remains, right? Why does God reveal himself like that? Why does he remain elusive? Why does he always escape us, right? Wouldn't it be nice if God could just, we could have a nice chat and clarify everything? I was listening today, I discovered a rapper. I forgot his name. This is terrible. Amazing rapper talking, where he's, I don't know if any of you know this guy. He raps in the video and he's dressed like Jesus and he's carrying a cross and he's asking a bunch of questions. Anybody know who this is? Am I the only one? Oh man, okay, nobody.
I think Hobson has a video like that.
Who?
Hobson?
It's a small, his name has 3 letters and it has an A in it. Nobody?
No, I don't know.
Man, okay, never mind. Whoever finds it right now, it would be nice. But anyways, I forget where I was now. It's about this rapper. Why? Where was I? Anybody? Somebody tell me where I was. It's hot and I can't think. Seriously, where was I?
Talking about the Descartes?
What?
You were talking about the Descartes?
No, you were asking why does God reveal himself like this?
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yes, Simone, he dresses like Jesus and he's carrying a cross, the rapper. Okay, yes. Why does God reveal himself in this way, right? Why can't he just be clear, right? A lot of you who are reading Levinas, right? It's like, why can't he be clear, right? Why can't God just clarify everything so we can stop, suffering and wondering and struggling with our questions, right? So there are 2 main reasons, right, that Levinas mentions, and we're gonna find a quote. Maybe I can ask you, how many of you think you know why God chooses to not reveal himself clearly? There are 2 reasons. Let's see if we can get an idea. Why do you think he's so cruel? By the way, there's a contemporary writer called Schellenberg, who is somebody who is an atheist apologetic, we would say, right? An atheist who will make all kinds of arguments why God cannot possibly exist, right? So he's right now living, writing. And he writes that what kind of cruel God, right, would remain hidden when we long for him so much and when we are in so much pain, right? What kind of cruel, right, being would do that? So he sees it as a sign of cruelty, right? This way that God withdraws or hides from us. It's a bad joke, right? Come out of your hiding. We're not laughing anymore. It's not fun anymore, right? To be in this world with a hidden God, right? So why do you think, right? There are 2 main reasons why God would choose to withdraw and not be clear. Can anyone come up with one or both of these?
So we can have an actual journey towards God.
Okay, excellent, Jolivas. I'm going to talk, that's my second point. I'm going to talk about that. Yes, it's in a way a respect for our own journey. We're going to talk about that. Is there another one? And very good, Cancino. That's the second one. You guys are great. I wish I could have you all the time. Wait, let's just be together. Let's not do any other. I won't teach anyone else and you won't learn from anyone else. This is really good. Cancino. Cancino says to keep the mystery alive. Okay, so 2 main reasons. Make sure you write them down. Why God chooses to withdraw. Why God chooses to hide. Number 1, if God doesn't hide, he's not God. He becomes an idol, right? If God is at the measure of our perception, it's not God anymore. It's not mystery. It's not enigma anymore, right? And by the way, God is not the only one who withdraws to our perception. Every single person you know withdraws to your perception, right? We can never fully understand each other, right? And we are not meant to understand each other fully or master or comprehend each other fully, right? The dimension of mystery that Marcel was talking about for Levinas exists within us, right? And within God. To remain a mystery, God cannot become our puppet or our little idol or something that we can fully comprehend, right? So here's the quote for that on page 75. So go with me to page 75 and you want to go, okay, the big paragraph on page 75, right in the middle towards the right, you have in parentheses IL. Who is there? Wave at me if you're there. Do you see the IL? Okay, I'm going to read right after that. The enigma comes to us from eleity. Let's skip that. Here's the line I want you to remember. The enigma is the way of the absolute foreign to cognition. Right? In other words, enigma, God presents himself as enigma and not phenomenon, because otherwise wouldn't be God anymore. Okay, so let me write down these 2 concepts, enigma and phenomenon, which is the title of the book, right? What's the difference between an enigma and a phenomenon? Does anybody know?
like the enigma is kind of like, oh, I'm not gonna say open to interpretation, but it's like a mystery. Like you have no idea what it really is, and then a phenomenon isn't actually happening. It's an occurrence, something that's been seen, and like something that we can describe and like be like, yeah, I know this happened.
Very good. Yes, enigma is mysterious. Phenomenon is something we can understand, see, witness, right? And so God, because he's a mystery, necessarily must remain hidden. Otherwise, it's not God, it's an object that we have mastered, or an idol, right? So that's the first reason. Second reason is what Levinas was talking about. Has to do with us. So let me explain. This he develops on page 70, so you can already turn there. And I'm going to explain, and then we're going to read the text. In other words, God is doing the reason, so this, I'll explain, and then we can read the text. God is withdrawing out of respect, like Levinas said, for our spiritual journey, or our, for the sake of the maturation of our relationship. So let me explain. Levinas gives the example of God as a seducer, right? So, and some of, probably none of us have ever heard this idea that God is out to seduce us, right? But God actually is a big seductor. In other words, he understands that to create a relationship, you can't just barge in and force people to love you. And sadly, this is how most religions depict God, right? There's even a funny story in the Talmud where when God gives the law on Mount Sinai, actually what happened is he took the mountain, put it above the people, and said, I will drop this mountain on you if you do not accept my commandments, right? So the people are like, yes, yes, we accept, right? So it's a joke, right? But in many religions, seriously, God is presented as someone who demands our worship, who has arrived. He is like the king, and now we have to worship him. There's no choice in the matter, right? Levinas is giving a very different image here. He's describing God as a seductor. Why? Because God understands that he can't barge into our lives. He can only woo us, court us, gently awaken in us the feelings, right? So it's very similar to, for example, if you're, let me give you a concrete image of what it means to seduce. This is great for the guys. This is Love 101. So suppose you're in a bar, right? And then you see this beautiful apparition, right? The woman of your dreams walks in, right? And now you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do to get her attention? So give me a list of things you shouldn't do. Can anyone give me a list of things you shouldn't do at that moment? That will ruin everything. It's over for you if you do this. Take notes, guys. Ladies, you can answer also. What would be a thing that would totally, yes, okay, Kristen, spill your, I see some experience there, some interesting backstory. Spill your drink, okay, so yes. But in terms of moving towards her, like in terms of love, like spilling your drink, that's being clumsy. But what shouldn't you do, right? You want to get her attention, right? What shouldn't you do what would you do wrong? What would mess things up? Apart from spilling your drink on her.
Just approaching in a way that will make them feel uncomfortable or make them feel threatened.
Yes, absolutely. Christensen has another great idea to mention the ex. Okay, very good. Yes, don't harass her. Wait for her sign. Okay, so you guys, in other words, don't barge in and be like, I love you, I want to marry you. What would happen if you came up to this girl and be like, and maybe you've been thinking about her a while, right? Maybe it's true, maybe it's sincere, and here you are giving you're completely sincere, you're a nice guy, you will treat her like a princess, and you come and you drop on one knee, she's never heard of you before, and you're like, I love you, you're the love of my life, let's get married. What's wrong with that?
You're a creep, get away.
Yes, very good. Sing, what did you say, Sing? Sorry?
That she's gonna run away.
Yes, very good, right? And all the girls are commenting. It's overwhelming, it's creepy, right? In other words, it's not, you have just destroyed the possibility of the relationship. So what you gotta do is to be more subtle. Now, how would you do that? You're more subtle, not because you want to play hard to get or play this game, like the love game, but you're more subtle for her sake. First of all, why would you be more subtle? And then tell me how you would be more subtle. Let's look at this. Let's clarify this game once and for all. Why would you choose to be more subtle? Nobody knows? we've established what happens if you're not subtle, right? So why would you choose to be more subtle? How would it help the relationship to be more subtle? Put it this way. Yes, very good, right? So some of it to draw them in, to keep her interest. In other words, you're more subtle for their sake. You understand that they need time. So you're going to be subtle and you're going to test the waters because you don't want to invade. You don't want to overwhelm. You are respectful of their space, emotional space. You're respectful of their emotional progress. And so you withdraw for their sake, right? Notice, I've just made the whole game of love beautiful. It's not about playing the game and being, do you know there's a book out there right now? It's a book for men. I was seeing some guy read it. It's about, is it the 10 Laws of Seduction? Anybody, who knows this book? Somebody tell me.
It's The Art of Seduction? Is that Robert Greene?
Yeah. What's the title?
Art of Seduction?
Can you write it down? Can't hear you. There's airplane.
Oh, okay. Oh. Art of Seduction?
The Art of Seduction. I think it's one of those books. Yes, I think that's
Robert Greene. I mean, yeah, there's an entire culture surrounded it.
It's extremely cynical, right? You're reading this, how to have power over the person, right? This is
it's all about manipulation.
Exactly. It's about the art of manipulation, right? So a lot of us don't even want to play the game because we don't want to manipulate. But what we're learning here is that it's not about manipulating. It's not about control. On the contrary, to seduce is about opening up a space of respect for the other person's rhythm. You see what I mean? So excellent. Yes, that's the one, Robert Greene, right? So this is giving really deep insight on the ethical dimension of seduction, right? You don't barge in, you respect the rhythm of the other person. Now, so now let's look at the how. How would you be subtle? Give me an example of how you could be subtle. What would be a way you could approach her? Nobody knows how to be subtle anymore, huh? Y'all on Tinder, just click. All the expectations are laid out, the cards are on the table, no need for seduction. How would you be subtle? Give me hope that this generation knows how to seduce. Okay, very good, Holibas, right? You would compliment her. So at that point, she doesn't know, right? You might be interested, but you might not. It might just be the way you are, but right, you're opening up something. But you're opening it up very gently and subtly so that, right, maybe she can be interested, right? Another
lighthearted conversation.
Go ahead.
That's not adding on the lighthearted conversation, things that ease into creating more space for them to have these more open, more personal dialogues over time.
Very good, right? So you're very gentle. Right now, what will determine how far you go? What is needed for you to make the next move? Now, this is important. We'll see that when it comes to God. I'm going somewhere with this. How would you know what's the next move? What would tell you what's the next move to make?
I guess the receptiveness they have to you and interest.
Exactly, right? Cancino is saying the same thing. In other words, how open you are, how the woman is open to you, right? Suppose she accepts your invitation, right, to go for, a kind of generic coffee date, right? It's very inoffensive, right? Innocent, right? She accepts. Now okay, she accepted. Now I can make the next move. And then to the degree that she continues to accept your moves, you can move further and further, right? Closer and closer, right? So in many ways, how close you get to that woman depends on her. Make sure you write this down, right? All of this you need to have written down, right? First of all, number one, let's write this down. First, I'm going to do my own laws of seduction here. Number one, you seduce precisely because you don't want to control and overwhelm. You seduce because you are respectful of their emotional space, right? Number two, how you seduce, we talked about. Number three, how far you go depends on how receptive they are. In other words, you can't get close if she's always saying no, right? She's got to sometimes accept, and that moves you closer and closer, right? So now it's exactly the same with God, according to Levinas, right? I skipped the second thing, just two things. First thing is, so you can just write the first and third thing. Number one, right? You seduce not because you want to manipulate, but because you are respectful of their emotional rhythm or space. And number two, You blanking out. Oh my God. What's number 2? Which was
it was you can only be accepted depending on how receptive they are to you.
Yes, I can't teach in 80-degree weather, okay? This is impossible. Okay, look, I'm all red like from the heat. Okay, so yes, the second point which you need to write down is that you can only move as close as they will let you, right? Okay, now it's the same thing for God, right? You're welcome. It's the same thing for God, right? He can only, right? In other words, he moves forward only to the degree that we let him, right? In other words, there has to be a degree of openness and receptivity for God. And the reason a lot of us, right, don't perceive God is that when there is a manifestation, we brush it off. Nah, that's nothing. Nah, that's just my imagination. Nah, that's coincidence, right? So anytime there is a very subtle, because in the beginning it's always subtle, right? God is always subtle in the beginning. So it's obviously you can't be sure. But as to the degree that you acquiesce, that you consent, that you move, right, that you receive what has just been offered, right, that there will be more and more manifestations, right? So God likewise, right, he's subtle for our sake. So 2 points, he's subtle for our sake, for in order to give us room to grow fond of him rather than imposing or manipulating us, right? And number 2, he can only come as close as we let him, right? And the reason a lot of us are sensing more acutely than others the hiddenness or distance of God is that perhaps, according to Levinas, you are not receiving the subtle manifestations. You are not reading the signs. You are not following the signs or the manifestation. Our mind brushes it off, right? And so forth. So let's go in the text and see how he puts it, right? Everything that I just said. So I'm on page 70, the big paragraph on page 70. I'm exactly in the middle when it talks about a lover makes an advance. Okay, I'm gonna give you time to find it. So the big paragraph exactly in the middle when he says a lover makes an advance. Who is there? Put your hand up. Okay, it's allowed you. Okay, so I'm gonna read there. So now he's starting with a lover, right? And then he will compare God to this lover. A lover makes an advance, but the provocative and seductive gesture has, if one likes, not interrupted the decency of conversation and attitudes. It withdraws as lightly as it slipped in. Yes, page 70, right? In other words, when you're being subtle, you make a move, but at the same time, you keep it a little vague, right? You don't want to be too provocative, right? So you give and you take at the same time. You give, but it's not completely clear, right? What you are looking for. So that's the subtlety, right? So he says the same thing. Now moving into describing God. A God was revealed on a mountain or in a burning bush or was attested to in scripture. And then the doubt comes in. What if it was a storm? What if the scriptures came to us from dreamers? Let us dismiss the illusory cult, right? So immediately, right, since we're never sure, right, we are told God reveals himself in this way, in that way, we see it, and yet we dismiss it because it doesn't make sense up here, right? So we dismiss it, and the insinuation itself invites us to do so, right? God's subtlety itself is making us want to do that, right? And then he says the main thing, right? Actually, it is up to us, or more exactly, it is up to me to retain or to repel this God without boldness, right? In other words, this is what I was telling you before. It's up to you. How close God comes to you is up to you, right? How open are you? Remember, that's what we talked about with Marcel, right? Marcel says you can access mystery to the degree that you are open to some of these experiences, right? Some of these feelings, and you're not brushing them off, right? Now, Levinas is saying the same thing. So the degree that you're open and receptive and willing to move forward along with the signs, that you will get closer and closer revelations and manifestations, right, of God. So that's the idea here, right? In other words, God is shy, or God is a seductor, right? And that's why he is not obvious, right? That's the second reason. Okay, so all right, let's take a break because I'm about to die. So what we're going to see now in the next section, we're actually going to see Levinas move away from this notion of God as a seductor, because Levinas is going to, we know, is somebody who refuses, and I'll explain why, any type of vertical relationship. Right? So Levinas is not after a personal relationship with God. He doesn't believe in that anymore. So the idea of God wooing us, courting us, he entertains it here in this text, but he will never talk about it again. And we'll see why, and why he chooses to opt for another direction. So after the break, we will look at Levinas's turn to another path. So let's meet again at 5:15. This is 4 minutes. 5:15, we'll start again with the second part of our lecture.